What up, Grind Squad? I'm back again for another part of my beginner guide series for Raid Shadow Legends. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Dragon Grind. I'm here to bring you game news, how-tos, and even a little entertainment. So if you have been following along the beginner guide series, then you should know that Minotaur is up next. And if you haven't, then make sure to hit that subscribe, turn on them notifications so you can be up to date with the knowledge bombs that I drop on my channel. But we're going to discuss a little bit about Minotaur today. I'm going to tell you the when, where, who, and how you should be grinding Minotaur to get your masteries done. So why don't we go ahead and get into it. Check this out.
It's that super flow, no, she my flow. Yeah. It's that.
So when should you start grinding Minotaur for your masteries? Well, the simplified answer is after you 6-star your clan boss team or your first 5 heroes, depending on however you choose to 6-star your heroes. Another way to gauge that is when you're maxing out hard clan boss and getting max chest and 2, maybe 3 keys, and you're ready to move up to brutal. But you want to make sure that you're prepared for brutal and that you have the ability to max out that clan boss as well on a day-to-day basis without too much stress. A few things that you might want to do before, make sure, check off the list before you start grinding Minotaur is get your team in a solid build, whether it's lifesteal for your DPS or your dot heroes, or speed and life sets for your support, just to make sure that they have plenty of sustain and you can utilize their abilities well throughout the match. So more or less that will tell you when you should start. Now let's talk a little bit more about where you should farm at. Okay, so here we're at the stage selection screen for Minotaur. But before we jump into that, let's address one question. You can buy masteries, so should you? Well, in my personal opinion, there is a clear-cut answer for this. If you do not have a Minotaur team maxed out yet, this is your first 5 heroes that you're maxing, it is definitely considerable to purchase your masteries. If you've spent and you have some money invested in the game and you want to make this as quick and painless as possible, you might want to consider buying your masteries for at least 3, maybe 4, preferably your first 5 heroes. Grinding through the stages to get to stage 15 and being able to farm that reliably can be very time consuming and cause a little bit of stress, and maybe even have you make some wrong turns and detours along the way before you can actually farm out stage 15 of Minotaur. I'm not one that usually pushes for spending too much in any of my content that I drop, but if you are a spender, buying these, like I said, at least 3 heroes, maybe 4 or 5 heroes masteries can be a good investment. As far as grinding them at stage 15, you spend like 720 gems just to do it the old-fashioned way of refills and grinding, and that's at level 60, your player level 60 and stage 15. So doing stage 13 and 14 to get up to stage, you're actually going to be spending a little bit more. But if you're free to play, you might not have that option, and you might have to do it take the long route there. So now that that's out of the way, let's start talking a little bit more about where you should focus at if you didn't buy your masteries. I myself, as well as most other content creators for Raid, they will tell you not to start grinding Minotaur until you can do stage 13 reliably, and I agree. You can do stage 13 and stage 14 up to the green scrolls without really wasting much energy or efforts to get to that, fill up your team with the tier 4, the green scroll masteries. After that point, you should be able to do stage 15, and if not, you might have to sub out a hero or 2. It all depends. So, if you end up doing the long road and grinding it this way, you can do 13, 14 to get to the green scrolls. By then, you need to do stage 15 for your red scrolls just to save yourself an ample amount of time and energy, gems, whatever. But when you get to stage 15, that's when it takes a little bit of a different turn, and you kind of have to rely a little bit more on sustain, so lifesteal, heals, things like that. And that leads us into the mechanics of it. So I will show you, examples of heroes that you might need to take into stage 15 later. But now let's go ahead and get into the actual fight of Minotaur. Now let's talk a little bit about who to bring. Like I said before, most of the time it'll be your clan boss team or your first five heroes that you 6-starred, and that's usually the solid start. Especially since a lot of them, tend to be sustain built because they're designed around your clan boss. Clan boss battles, and clan boss is kind of a sustain kind of battle. So that your clan boss team is going to be strong here. This is my beginner guide team that I've used. I've left them fairly untouched except for beginner guide content. So this is what we're going to use. Now, Bellower is my farmer. He has full masteries. He is, 6-star, fully ascended. He has pretty decent gear on him. Nothing too insane as I speed build my Bellower. He doesn't actually require a whole lot to be a fast farmer. And then I have Apothecary. Apothecary I was using in most content. He's kind of fallen off for me now as my roster has expanded, but he still has full speed sets on. He's pretty solid. He has full masteries. Those are my only two that have full masteries. Then we have Doom Priest here. Doom Priest is someone that I put in a Minotaur team. Due to her kit, she is built to tackle some of the mechanics of the Minotaur, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I also have her in a shield set. And, especially early to mid game when you're trying to just survive these stages, trying to push through them, time isn't such a factor. Bringing someone like Doom Priest who has heals in their kit, cleanse in their kit, and putting him in a shield set with some fairly high HP can be very helpful in, your sustain for your team throughout the process. But we'll get more into heroes at the end of this video. Juliana and Kale, they still need master, scrolls. Like I said, I've left them fairly untouched, and they have mediocre gear, something that could be adequate for, an early to mid game player. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Talk a little bit about the mechanics of the Minotaur. As far as the Minotaur, stage itself, it's the trash waves actually ain't too difficult. Like you will hear people say about, Spider, Dragon, Golem, Fire Knight, the end stages of those 16 through 20, the trash waves can be very difficult. Minotaur is actually, kind of more classic feel to raid, as the trash waves are there, and if you're not prepared, that they can mess you up a little bit. But as you can tell, my team's not having no issues. I have Doom Priest with the cleanse and the heals and the shield set. You can tell with the little shield bar that is in front of everybody's HP. Apothecary with the speed and turn meter increase and the single target heals. Now we did lose Kale. That's not an issue. To be honest, just one starter hero or one decent DPS that's in lifesteal, such as Juliana, can clear it easly. And that ain't no issue. Now getting into the Minotaur's actual mechanics. As you just seen here, that the Minotaur had placed an AoE debuff on 3 of my heroes. That's called the Hex debuff. And that is brought on by his A2. It's an AoE that places a Hex debuff for 3 turns on 3 random targets. This buff cannot be resisted. And what the Hex debuff does is it actually increases the damage that my team takes from all damage sources. So he puts it up, and then right here, we'll go ahead and take a look at it. Hex for 5 turns, and it will increase the damage that my team takes. And that's what Doom Priest is in there for. In her kit, she has an automatic cleanse every time her turn comes up, as well as a 7.5% heal. Go ahead and do it one more. And that's why I brought Doom Priest. She heals all allies by 7.5% of their HP and removes 1 random debuff from them at the start of Doom Priest's turn. So every time her turn comes around, she cleanses the team of 1 debuffs and gives them a minor heal. The Minotaur only brings 1 debuff, the Hex debuff. So it's a complete neutralization of one of the mechanics of the Minotaur. Now, one of the other end of the mechanics for the Minotaur is actually his passive. At the start of the battle, he starts with a rage buff, and while it's active, it decreases the damage, it increases the damage the Minotaur deals by 400%. It makes it very strong. That combined with the Hex debuff, and your team can be cleared out, especially early to mid game, can be cleared out very quickly. So you really have to watch that. That's why you need to bring someone like Doom Priest or Steel Skull. The Reliquary Tender is free to play friendly that has A cleanse, actually Steel Skull ain't even ideal because you want an AoE cleanse, so that way you can quickly neutralize that Hex debuff, because you cannot remove his rage buff that he starts with at the beginning of the battle. Both of his buff and debuff are, they cannot be removed or anything like that, so you have to wait out them first 3 turns for his rage buff to go away, while at the same time he's applying the Hex debuff that, those two combined does massive amount of damage to your team. Now, speaking of that, he starts with the rage buff for 3 turns that increases the damage he deals, but after those 3 turns, the rage buff expires and the Minotaur places a dazed debuff on himself. While the dazed debuff is active, it increases the damage that the Minotaur receives by 200%. So when you're going through this, you want to cleanse that Hex debuff, keep your team alive. Look, we didn't lose Kel this time. And you want to wait out them first 3 turns on that rage buff. Because when he loses the rage buff, he'll enter the dazed phase, and that's when he can take massive amounts of damage, and that's when you want to deal them, the most amount of damage. So for the first 3 turns, about clearing out that Hex debuff, keeping your team alive, and building up these debuffs such as attack down, defense down, and applying poisons and things like that. So that way, when that rage buff drops right here, then there's the dazed debuff right there, the broken skull, ramhorn skull. He can take a lot more damage. Now, to sum all that up, the abilities that you want to bring on your team is definitely debuff removal, preferably AoE debuff removal. Keep that speed and turn meter up if you can, such as Apothecary, things like that. Heals, which would be both Doom Priest and Apothecary for my team. And that will really help the Minotaur fight. Other things that you can bring that will help is like an AoE nuker to help with the trash waves, really break that down, decrease the time that it takes for you to do your runs. And if you don't have an AoE cleanser, then defense up will be very helpful. So that way, while you're dealing with the Hex debuff, you can have an increased defense so the Minotaur does less damage, as well as an attack down for the Minotaur. So that way you can really mitigate as much damage as you can that he deals out. If you're not prepared for this, he will nuke out your teams, even at stage 13, let alone at stage 15. So really watch for that. And another little tip, an ability or skill that you don't want to bring would be speed and turn meter decrease, because you want him to get through his first 3 turns to get out of that rage phase of his. So you don't want to limit his speed too much. I have Bellower who has decreased speed. I sacrifice that for a nuker. Take your pick on that. But you definitely don't want to consistently keep his speed down and his turn meter down, things like that. You want to get past them first 3 turns and get into that dazed state, so that way you can really do, massive amounts of damage. So that's about it for the Minotaur mechanics and who to bring and when and where and all of that. Now I'm going to shoot over and show you some hero highlights. Just point out a few heroes that I think is effective in the Minotaur that might actually bring, some good utility to your team. Okay, so we're here at the index, and I just want to kind of take this moment to point out a few heroes that, if you have them in your roster, it might really help your progress in pushing to stage 15 and grinding out the Minotaur for masteries. First one I'm going to start with is Doom Priest. She is absolute SS tier for the Minotaur, without a doubt. She just has a proper kit to keep your team alive and manage some of the mechanics of the boss. So we'll get into it. Her A1 is a single target hit that if you build her with crit rate and she crit hits, she will place a 15% increased crit rate buff on a random ally for 2 turns. It's not OP or nothing like that, but to add a little bit of crit rate to your clan boss team who you might not have crit rate built can be very helpful in dealing damage to the Minotaur at the end, especially by the time you got a couple of these up on your DPS heroes when the Minotaur enters their daze phase. Could be very helpful. Her A2 is an AoE increased attack, helpful for the trash waves, helpful for the Minotaur itself. And then her all more important ability is heal all allies by 7.5% of their HP and removes 1 random debuff, the Hex debuff, from them at the start of this champion's turn. So you pump her full of speed and sustain, and she will be able to really support and mitigate as much damage and mechanics of the Minotaur as possible. Also, as a little side note, I put my Doom Priest in a shield set. Really adds that, you know, that little touch of sustain to the trash waves to make sure that you don't randomly lose a hero. The next one that I'm going to go to would be your starter hero. They're magic based, so they're good affinity for stage 13, 14, and, you know, neutral for 14, 15, good for 13. Can be very helpful. All of them have, you know, decent mechanics. You have Kale, who has his poisons and a couple multi-hit AoE kind of moves. Elaine, big AoE nuker, even brings some of her own crit rate, things like that. Aethel has self buff. Weaken, which is strong against any of the dungeon bosses. 3-hit A1, so when you do get Giant Slayer tier 6 mastery on her, she'll do very nice damage. And even Galek, who has some speed, and you know, you throw lifesteal on him, he has a multi-hit move. He can even do some damage. I hope you didn't pick Galek to start with. The answer is always Kale. Elaine's pretty good too. Anyway, so that's your starter hero. Other than that, a few suggestions that I can go with is, as you've seen in mine, Bellower, all his skills are AoE, nukers. He doesn't do insane amount of damage, but I pump mine up with speed, and he consistently stays nuking. Another option back in the night revs, as far as nukers go, would be Skull Crown. She's just a peach when it comes to nuking. She is a little squishy, you know what I mean? So you have to worry about that in when you're when you're building her, you got to build her with some sustain. But she brings the weaken, and her A1 can actually hit twice when the enemy is above 50% HP. Very strong. She also has an unkillable buff and a self-res if you pair her with her tandem hero Sinesha. Very good, strong AoE nuker. Other than that, getting more back into the support, someone that I haven't brought up yet is Gorgorab. Gorgorab kind of brings a wide versatility to his kit that can really help you through early to mid game dungeons in general, but that also applies to the Minotaur. His A1 removes a random buff. It's not too helpful. Can help with the trash waves a little bit. It cannot remove the Minotaur's rage buff. Like I said earlier, that those cannot be removed. His A2 is an AoE turn meter increase for your team, 15%, as well as places the big boy version of increased attack buff on all your allies. Can be very helpful in every wave of the Minotaur. And then his A3, if you are having issues with sustain, you don't have Doom Priest and Apothecary and all that, can revive. It's an AoE revive. Revives them with 25% of their HP, and then heals them an additional 25% of their HP. So essentially, reses them with 50% HP. His aura is arena only, so we're not going to go into that. And the last one is a legendary rare, as he's called, and he fits the bill. It's Apothecary. I'm sure you've heard plenty about him. He is just great at the Minotaur, especially if you don't have a very verse, epic, and legendary pool to pick from. His A1 is a 3-hit, so when you do get tier 6 on him and he stays in your Minotaur team to help you grind out other heroes, his getting Giant Slayer on him will proc a lot of damage off of his A3, or his A1, I'm sorry, which is a 3-hit, which is very helpful when you're talking about, boss stages. His A2 is a single target heal that heals by 35% HP, but it can crit. Now, crit damage does not affect this, but his heal can crit for an additional 50% of 35%, which is 17. In other words, he single target heals for like 52% of an ally's HP. And then his A3, his big boy skill, the one that everyone falls in love with. It places the big boy version of increased speed buff on all allies, 30% for 2 turns, and then fills their turn meter by an additional 15%. This is a staple speed meta hero. He's great, useful in every part of the game. A lot of people in in-game still use him for dungeons. Just whatever. He's great. And then he actually had, out of all the ones I've showed, he is actually one of the ones that has an aura that is beneficial for the Minotaur. An all ally defense aura for dungeons by 21%. Solid. So that's essentially just a few ideas. There's plenty more, depending on what role you're talking about, depending on what heroes you've got, who you've pulled. Defense heroes are very good for the Minotaur. You throw them in lifesteal, they can take damage, heal themselves back up, very self-sustainful, And a lot of times, like Rosin and Tyrell and all of them, they can actually solo the Minotaur when they get to the Minotaur. So you fill your team up, you get them through the first couple trash waves. By the time you get to the Minotaur, if your team isn't built to, if the rest of your team isn't built to survive stage 15, your defense scaling hero and lifesteal can. Well, that's it. That's about all you should need to know to tackle the Minotaur. I went through when you should start, what you should tackle, who you should bring, a few hero highlights. It'd be good to go now. So if you did find this video helpful, make sure you tap that like, hit that subscribe, turn the notifications on. I'll be covering every aspect of the game from my beginner's guide all the way up to the in-game content, and then continuing on with the in-game content. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments. I reply to everybody's questions and comments, just show some love or to answer, your concerns. And if you would like to have some more one-on-one help, maybe shoot some ideas, theory craft, anything like that, you can find me over at Twitch. I will leave a link down in the description for that. I pretty much try to stream as many days as possible throughout the week, and I'm pretty frequent Friday, Saturday evenings. So come over and say hi there. Feel free to join us. Till next time, happy grinding. May the shards break in your favor.